Hi everyone, this is Brooke, the founder of the Santa Barbara Blockchain Institute, and I'm here to provide Bitcoin lessons for everyone. Our website address is down there below. Please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. I love to continue making connections and to help grow this adoption and grow this exciting new world. Today's lesson is lesson number 3 out of a series of 10 lessons I'm posting here on the YouTube channel to help bring understanding to Bitcoin. And lesson 3 is actually one of the more exciting ones. I'm going to kind of zoom out and give you a big picture view of things. And this is really the reason why when I started reading the white paper and subsequent books that I mentioned about in my intro, really was exciting to me because I do see this as a transformational technology. And so today I want to talk about what is a transformational technology and how does Bitcoin really fit that bill. We got to start though with the disclosures. I'm not a financial advisor and this is not investment advice in any way. Do your own research. This is just an informational educational lecture. I'm also not a programmer or technical expert, so I try not to go too deep into the weeds. Just keep it light and easy so folks can understand through easy comparisons to today's world what I'm trying to explain. And lastly, I do hold digital assets myself, so I do have skin in the game and want to let you know that. As I said, we've come to realize that the Bitcoin code is actually a transformational technology and it may solve many weaknesses that exist in our current world. And when I talked about the tokens and the trust and the ledgers and so forth in past lectures, I think you've come to see that there are a lot of holes in the way we do things and a lot of opportunity for things to be done the wrong way, mistakes to be made, fraud to occur, and so forth. And so when I read this, I realized, boy, there's a big, huge opening here that's been given to us, and we'll talk about the gift that Bitcoin technology seems to have been to us in solving many things. So, what I'm going to try to answer in this lesson is what do transformations do to our world? How and why is Bitcoin transformational? Why is Bitcoin in particular unique as a concept? And how can we kind of envision using blockchains and how they fit into our existing world? So transformational technologies are things that can be used as ongoing fuels for development. My favorite comparisons or my favorite examples are electricity. In 1752, many of you know the story, Ben Franklin flying his kite and capturing electricity for the first time. Little would he have guessed that these centuries later we would still be using electricity. And this time, for example, in 2 of our satellites, Voyager 1 and 2, that have actually left our solar system, still harnessing energy from the sun, converting it into electricity and using that to send us messages back about our universe. Pretty crazy. Ben could not probably have even foreseen that. And we still use electricity in our microprocessors and so forth. So ongoing development is the idea here, big picture. Also, another example I like to use is steel. We've kind of known about steel for several thousand years even. We have very early examples of how we know that if you combine carbon and iron, you get this new metal alloy called steel. But there was no way of effectively making a lot of it. We didn't know how to make quantities of it that would be useful until 1856, and a fellow named Bessemer invented a process to make steel. Later on, we'll talk about environment and some of the complaints about Bitcoin. It turns out that steel making is actually pretty polluting, but we kind of ignored that because what it brought us was this transformation to our world. Our old cities used to be very much limited to how tall a building you could build with stone, brick, mud, stucco, that type of thing. But with steel, all of a sudden our infrastructure was transformed. Large buildings, bridges, freeways, rail systems, transit systems, and so forth. So steel really has turned into an ongoing fuel for development, also a transformation to our society. Why is Bitcoin a transformational technology? Well, first, let's be a little bit more precise about what it is. It's a computer program, and it was given to us anonymously, basically, about a dozen years ago. because it's a computer program, it was actually written out by an individual or individuals, we don't really know. And it did actually meld together a bunch of things that had been sort of tried before. So Adam Back and Wei Dai and some early inventors of digital currencies had failed to solve all of the problems that come up when you're trying to do a money. But this inventor of Bitcoin sort of put together these pieces into a pie and also blended them in with these incredibly smart incentives, these compelling incentives whereby bad actors, people who might be tempted to try to take advantage of it, hack it, to take it over, they're really super disincentivized, and everybody participating with the network actually does better if they join it than to fight it. And that's kind of the nature behind these incentives. They're so brilliant, such a brilliant manifestation of human behavior that it's really worked, and that's phenomenal. So think of it as a pie. Another comparison that I like to make is you can also think of Bitcoin as kind of similar to a Swiss Army knife. It's kind of open to putting whatever variations of tools into it that you can think of. It's really limitless. And several concepts here is that, yeah, you can see all different sort of sizes of tools and new tools in the shops, so that these Swiss Army knives get huge with all these variations. And some of them are things that probably the creators never even imagined they would be used for. You know, the awl being used for something that the creator of the awl didn't really intend or think about, but nevertheless it's useful. The second thing is that it's just a tool. And people can use Swiss Army knives for really bad purposes and intents. They can use them in bad ways. You can't control how people are going to decide to use a tool. That doesn't take away from the value of the tool. It can also be extraordinarily useful. And so those are sort of the two reasons why I like this comparison. But let's talk about why Bitcoin technology, blockchain technology is transformational. And what it really boils down to is that it brings us some freedoms to the individual level that we have not really had since the invention of the internet. Now, we all felt like the internet was free and we could get on and we could surf and do whatever we wanted to on our own. But as it turns out, as the internet matured and we got into Web 2 companies like Facebook and Amazon and so forth, that actually they're sort of using and collecting our data and keeping track of us, and it's not quite as free as one would think it would or should be. Now, the blockchain technology takes out those big, large actors, those intermediaries, whether they be governments or private corporations, and it allows peer-to-peer communication and transactions, and that's really big. So on my bullet points here, first I talk about it being natively digital. A lot of things from my youth were done on pencil and paper, and when the computers came along, we just kind of converted their processes onto the computer. That wasn't really natively digital. That was just sort of converting stuff, and some of it didn't work so well. That's one of the reasons why computer networks get hacked all the time. The internet wasn't developed with security in mind. It was developed to just get people communicating with each other, which it works well for. But being natively digital, this blockchain technology is able to take advantages of things that are initially developed online. The decentralized aspect that I've talked about is you and I can do a deal even if we don't know each other. We don't need anybody in between. We can do any sorts of transactions. And because this computer code that was given to us is open source, we can modify it so that it doesn't have to just be about a money transaction. It could be communication, it could be other things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The verifiability and immutability are characteristics of this that also makes this a transformational technology. Instead of being a vertical orientation, a command structure whereby, you know, the bank holds all the information, or Facebook holds all the information, a large corporation or a government entity, and collects the information, we can do deals ourselves. And these get immutably written down on a ledger. Instead of a vertical orientation, we have a horizontal cooperative structure evolving where we can all see all of the transactions. We all get to verify it together, and we all get to record it in a way that will be kept and preserved. immutably. And that's really transformational because anytime you've dealt with an error from a bank or a title company, an institution, it's mostly because there's been this vertical structure to it and somebody made a mistake. So the last characteristic that really makes technology transformational, and this applies to the internet also, is that it's cheap and it's relatively quick. And that's why, for example, the iPhones have taken off so quickly because they're relatively cheap for all the tools that are packed into the iPhone, and they work relatively quickly. So we like that. And although some might argue, well, I've already got Venmo for the money side of things, and it's really fast and it's peer to peer. That's not actually true. It's really not peer to peer. It goes through a bunch of institutions, and it's also really not quick. Those transactions in our traditional banking system don't finalize for 60 to 90 days. We have chargebacks, we have disputes. It's not final in our traditional system. With blockchains, the transaction is final and a relatively quick amount of time. So these are the types of reasons why this technology is transformational. It really brings power to the individual. Bitcoin is unique as a concept amongst all of these other cryptos that have now emerged. Bitcoin is the original and the first computer code that was put out there to us. We don't know who came up with it. We don't know whether this was an individual or a group, a man, a woman. It's got what we would call an immaculate conception. Whoever started it, we have not heard from a peep in 10 years. Whoever started it walked away from it without cashing in anything, without having investors, early investors, or VCs, venture capitalists who they owe money to. There's no board of directors. There's no CEO, president. There's no physical location for Bitcoin. It is a computer program that lives on tens of thousands of computers spread all over the world. And that's kind of crazy, but it's happened. And it's grown on its own because of those things I said. Peer-to-peer, cheap, useful, fast. These are the characteristics that have helped it grow without really any organized oversight. So there's nobody to sue, there's nobody to go after. China tried to ban the miners a couple of years ago, and it's just not successful because they just relocate on different computers all over the world. It's completely decentralized without a single point of control. So Bitcoin stands alone. Almost all of the other cryptos that you know about have a founder. They have people who contributed money, who want to make money off of it. They have venture capitalists who are in it for that purpose also. People need to get paid back. People want to see a return on investment. Bitcoin has none of those. It started with a value of 0, and it was several years before it actually started to be worth anything at all. So this immaculate conception makes it unique among all of the crypto world, and really one of the reasons for its continued success. Michael Saylor is one of the first people. He's an MIT trained mathematician, and he's run a company for 30 years or so, and he's one of the first people that realized, wow, this thing is really an interesting asset. It's an issuer-less commodity. There is nobody in charge. It's like gold. It doesn't have a boss. If you want some, you can go out and get some. If you make an investment in time and an investment in energy, you can get some of this new digital gold. And so he started putting it on his balance sheet famously. What he says, 3 things make Bitcoin unique, is that it's ethically sound also. Because of that foundation story, because there is no issuer, because we don't have a CEO, there are no VCs, it doesn't rely on anybody's morals or ethics, as we found out from the FTX debacle this year, whereby the guy was just a crook. We don't have to deal with that because we are all players. We are all incentivized to watch and keep it going. So it is ethically sound. It doesn't rely on anybody but a whole network incentivized to behave well. It's a commodity without an issuer, just like gold. So Bitcoin secondarily is also technically sound. Nobody's managed to break into its security or hack it pretty much in its entire existence. It's operated virtually the entire time since it was first released. There were a couple of very small bugs in the very beginning when it was only a bunch of computer nerds trading it back and forth for basically free, where those bugs got fixed right away, and it has operated exactly the way it's supposed to for the last 10 years. Bitcoin, lastly, is economically sound. It gives a positive market based value proposition to people that invest in it. It separates the people who are creating it, the miners who are validating transactions and perhaps earning some more little bits of Bitcoin, from the people who just own the commodity itself. So you could be a gold miner or you could be an owner of gold. You don't have any more say over the protocol, over the commodity, no matter which you are or how much you do either. It just is what it is. And at any time, you can go out and mine more gold. You can go out and mine Bitcoin if you're willing to invest the time and energy needed to get it. So for these three reasons, Bitcoin really stands alone from most of the other crypto world, who again have founders, they have investors, they have people that they owe money to, they have locations, they have assets that can be leaned on, they have people to call. Bitcoin does not have any of these things. What can blockchains do well? From Bitcoin, that computer code, because it was presented to us just online as a bit of code and open sourced, it can be copied. So all of these other cryptos that you hear about are copies of this original code that have been modified a little bit to do different things. Some of them will work well, in my opinion. We'll have many blockchain uses in the future. But in the beginning, of course, humans and emotions and greed take over, and these copies proliferate without any real solid use cases. And that's why we've seen a lot of this world get disrupted and the troubles we've seen, like any nascent technology being used or misused. But what we know they can do very well, once we get organized and figure out how to do this, is they can protect your assets. Bitcoin has not been hacked. There's a hack every 10 seconds in the world. Ongoing because of lack of security controls. Bitcoin has not been hacked. It can protect your currencies against inflation and bad management. It can reduce transaction fees and the number of intermediaries or any intermediaries or monopolies, and it can save you time. It can enable peer-to-peer transactions. You and I've never met you, but we could do a deal on the Bitcoin network and be satisfied that it is accurate and truthful and will be recorded for all time. It enables lending outside of the current system, which is rife with all sorts of special deals and controls of vertical orientation that I was talking about. It can enable secure and divisible ownership of both tangible goods and intangible goods. Like a skyscraper in Manhattan, we could carve into 1 million pieces and accurately track and reliably monitor and maintain something like that, which is just not possible with today's technology, other technologies. Intangible goods like NFTs, we're familiar with the craziness of the internet world and its lack of security. You can right click, copy, paste any image and not worry about it. But that's not the case with blockchain imagery, that artists realize that they can have a way of recording something's originality that can't be messed with. And while copies may certainly be able to be made, we can always verify what an original is online, and that's a huge concept. We'll talk about that more later. Protecting your identity, protecting your records of existence, of citizenship, of rights. It's really a fantastic security apparatus that's been given to us, and I see us moving forward in some of these areas once we get past all of the craziness of the excitement of this technology and the poor decisions in management and the fraud that's been happening. Records of ownership and another thing that we can definitely use to protect it. I worked as a realtor, so that we base a lot of the recording of titles on ancient paper records in county offices. That's not very reliable. Now we can have a secure, reliable chain of ownership that is recorded on a ledger we all agree to, and it can maintain its verifiability and immutability forever. Protecting your work products in real time. I mentioned the art idea, but also business records. If you imagine on a private blockchain, which is another thing I'll discuss, a company could have the various departments verifying the pieces of their operation in real time and recording and cementing the books of the business in real time and the tracking of things on the Internet of Things, the tracking of inputs and outputs, and this all can be done in real time in a verifiable and immutable way. So auditors and accountants, they may not be so necessary anymore when we're talking business records. So these are all really exciting ways that the blockchain technology might be able to help us out. Now, can it do everything? No. And here's how I see that problem is that I mentioned the vertical management and control system versus horizontal. Here's my analogy. If we want to commute into a city to do work, some of us will drive cars. That'll be very useful because if you have a car, you've got flexibility, agility, independence. You can make your own schedule. You can go wherever you want. So it's fantastic in that method. Like a startup company, you want to have that agility and independence and rapidness of decision making. However, there are a lot of costs that come with that. As you know, if you drive a car into the city every day to commute, you've also got to pay for your fuel, your parking, the maintenance of that vehicle is all on you, the insurance costs. Not to mention if everybody decides to drive their cars, now you've got traffic to deal with. Where do you keep the car in the parking and all of these things that come about because there's so much independence. That's the reason why we have public transportation. So if we can have some cooperative efforts, people riding buses and trains together, going roughly the same places, roughly at the same time, merging their needs together, then they don't have to pay a lot of these costs. They may not suffer from those traffic jam delays. They may be able to get around much quicker on public transportation and much more cheaply because they don't have to pay insurance and fuel and maintenance and all of these other things you've got to cover in your own car. So is there room for both of these types of processes in our world? Of course there is. Not everything is appropriate for this horizontal management style. But there certainly are benefits that can accrue in terms of costs and speed and so forth. So our world of the future is going to have some blockchain and some centralized management as we have in the past. It seems fairly clear to me that that's our future. But there is certainly a place for this cooperative type of management as our public transportation systems attest. So Bitcoin was created as a peer-to-peer currency originally because someone or some people got a little ticked off at what happened to the whole trust and ledger system back in the late aughts with the great financial crisis. We've come to realize that the computer program that was created to make up an electronic currency actually represents a transformational technology, and it can have untold uses to solve all sorts of different problems because of the problems that it solved were tough ones, and they could be adapted to take care of other issues that we've got and that we've had throughout our existence, really. So that's really the super exciting part of it for me. And when you zoom out and see the big picture of why this blockchain technology, as brought to us by specifically Bitcoin, which is different from almost every other of these variations for now, is really going to be transformational technology that we're going to continue to use and benefit from for years and years to come. So the next lecture in my series, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the actual model of Bitcoin and blockchains that I've come up with, and we'll talk a little bit more about how it actually operates. But for now, I hope that was a good overview and understanding of why Bitcoin is a transformational technology. Please don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch with me if you've got any questions or you'd like to discuss it further. Thanks.